From the original Bull Durham tobacco sacks to the modern surge of Zyn, can MLB players chew tobacco? You know, it's funny how deeply ingrained smokeless tobacco is in the history of baseball. Way back in 1912, there was this epic marketing campaign where players would score not only $50, but also a whole bunch of Bull Durham tobacco sacks for hitting a homer off wooden bull statues. Crazy, right? And yeah, it worked wonders for sales. This same brand even played a role in naming a team, the Durham Bulls. Some of you might recognize that name from the classic 1988 movie. But fast forward to today, and the scene's a bit different. Sure, you still have the Durham Bulls around with that massive bull statue, but the whole tobacco scenario has taken a more, let's say, visible turn. Gone are those discreet ads and big-time players sporting noticeable lumps of tobacco under their lips. Like when they casually spit brown globs into the dugouts or hearing the sound of tins being packed, that was discreet marketing. It's not just bad for your health, but it sets a pretty risky example for young fans. Joe Garagiola knew this all too well. The guy was a legend both as a broadcaster and a catcher. He had his days with the chew back in the 50s and 60s. But fast forward to 1994, and there's Joe, year after year, walking through major league clubhouses promoting the National Spit Tobacco Education Program. But sometimes, even the most significant efforts need a jolt. In 2012, MLB finally said, "Enough." Throughout the game, you were not permitted to carry any more tobacco packets in your pocket, and city laws followed, banning smokeless tobacco at ballparks. When MLB's 2016 collective bargaining agreement came into effect, it tried to change the tide by banning the use of smokeless tobacco for all new entrants into the big leagues. An impressive accomplishment given that approximately 37% of the league had adopted the practice by the time they were 25. But it didn't apply to the seasoned players. The good news? The winds of change are blowing. As more cities say no to smokeless tobacco at their ballparks, and as the old guard gradually phases out, those numbers are destined to dip, no pun intended. You can't carry tins or packs of the stuff once the fans are around. And interviews? Absolutely no smokeless tobacco is allowed in sight. The league knows the impact players have on fans, especially the young ones. They're not just athletes, they're influencers and role models. Now, with all the rules, you'll have folks on both sides of the fence. Take Joe Maddon, for instance. While he quit the habit, he was pretty vocal about not being told what to do. A viewpoint on personal freedom, which is valid. But then there are many players who view the ban positively. They saw it as the nudge they needed to break free from the habit. The real question is, why did the MLB allow it in the first place? Well, it's essential to remember the broader context. Tobacco use was prevalent in society for a long time. Its health hazards, while suspected, weren't as concretely documented as they are today. And baseball, being the American pastime, reflected the habits and norms of the day. Smoking was booted out of the dugout and off the field, and that was a step in the right direction. But the league grappled with the chew. As with many changes, it took time, pressure, and shifting societal norms to prompt action. The old school folks, and I get where they're coming from, have a tough time changing habits tied deeply to tradition. But there's no denying it. Spitting streams of tobacco juice isn't a good look. It's not just unattractive, it sends the wrong message to the younger generation. Also, this one habit has done irreversible damage to the baseball community. Think about it. For years, these players were not only harming their health, but also indirectly endorsing a hazardous product every time they stepped onto the field. And this wasn't just an isolated act, it became an integral part of the baseball culture. Training sessions, locker room banter, pre-game rituals. Tobacco was everywhere. Such extensive exposure also meant that the risks were exponentially amplified. The untimely demise of Tony Gwynn in 2014 brought a harsh reality to the forefront. The legend's death from salivary gland cancer was a wake-up call. Though the association between his cancer and tobacco use isn't conclusive, it did make many players reflect. Even though the 2016 ban did cause a decline in the use of smokeless tobacco by players, some still sneak it in from time to time, sometimes even in front of television cameras. Zyn, however, has played a significant role in the recent drop in chewing tobacco use on MLB fields. It's a brand offering tobacco-less nicotine pouches and seems to be the new player on the field. They're gaining popularity, especially among those looking for an alternative to traditional tobacco. With a range of flavors and devoid of messy dip spit, these pouches offer a nicotine experience without tobacco. DL Hall, a rookie with the Orioles, is among the baseball players who found an ally in Zyn, using it as a bridge away from the traditional dip. While he acknowledges the presence of addictive nicotine in Zyn, he points out its lack of harmful tobacco elements. However, the FDA doesn't put nicotine pouches like Zyn in the same category as known cessation tools, such as patches or gum. So, while there's a noticeable shift in the MLB landscape, with players gravitating towards what they believe are healthier choices, the debate on its benefits remains. Jill Selzel from the Nebraska University School of Medicine mentioned in a 2021 article, "If you've managed to swap tobacco for nicotine pouches like Zyn, that's a step. But the end game should be to eventually be free from nicotine altogether." That makes sense, right? While Zyn lacks the toxic elements found in traditional dip, we're still in the dark about any long-term effects tied to high-level nicotine consumption. Remember when vaping became a big thing? Zyn's marketing of those appealing flavors that may appeal to a younger audience makes it somewhat reminiscent of that. The figures are pretty telling. Back in 2019, Zyn's sales were about 6 million cans. Jump to 2 years later, and they're pushing 37 million. That's a staggering 516% surge. And while other brands like On, Lyft, and Velo are making their presence felt, Zyn seems to be the main player, accounting for almost 2/3 of the nicotine pouch sales in the US in the last year. An anonymous player from the American League gave a bit of insight. He said he uses about 3 6-milligram pouches of Zyn several times a day, hitting around 90 milligrams of nicotine daily. And he reckons that's pretty standard among the players who use them. Then there's JT Brubaker from the Pirates. He told Fox Sports that he's more of a 2-pouch guy, mainly because it feels more like the big pinch of Copenhagen he used to go for. Brubaker's story with tobacco goes way back, starting in high school, then through college and the minors, right up to the big leagues. He confessed that, at his highest use, he could finish off a tin in just a day and a half. Dip was always around, especially in the minor leagues, according to him. It was like a mini community. You'd share a dip and someone would share one back later. But now, things are different for Brubaker. After a few tries to cut down on the tobacco, he switched to Zyn and hasn't looked back. You see, when a behavior becomes ritualistic, it's more than just an act. It's a rite of passage, a nod to the generations before, and a means of bonding with teammates. In a sport where superstitions run rampant, from not stepping on the foul line to wearing the same unwashed socks during a winning streak, it's no surprise that a habit like tobacco use becomes deeply ingrained. Yet, as one vice fades, others have crept in to take its place. The ritual of a pre-game energy drink, the new Zyn fad, or even the reliance on supplements to enhance performance, they all reflect a larger trend in the game. Players often find replacements seeking comfort in routines or substances that give them an edge or simply fill the void. Just as chewing tobacco was once the norm, these new habits become a part of the modern player's regimen, proving that while the specific vice might change, the need for ritual remains. But why baseball? Well, the slower pace of the game gives players moments of downtime, allowing them to indulge. A pitcher waiting on the mound, an outfielder anticipating a fly ball. They have those pauses where a pinch of tobacco becomes part of the routine. It's less about the tobacco and more about the ritual and the comfort it provides in high-pressure moments. In comparison, sports like basketball or soccer have a constant motion that doesn't lend itself to such habits. Football might have stop-and-go action, but the physical intensity and equipment don't allow for easy tobacco use. In a way, baseball is uniquely suited to it. So from the modern surge of Zyn to the original Bull Durham tobacco sacks, this is why MLB players chew tobacco.